Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Z Talks, where I talk about books, movies, TV shows, places, and things that relate to history and classic literature. Now, today's episode will be a little bit of a follow up part two on one of the episodes I did a couple weeks back on the University of Cambridge, because today I will be talking about the University of Oxford. And I'll just say from now, I think this will be the last episode that I will do on university in London or the UK, unless you guys have any other recommendations and you want me to go and seek out another university to tell you guys about its history and just explore the grounds and take some nice cute pics. But today I will be doing just that for the University of Oxford. You will see some nice pics, learn a little bit about the history of it, and just some interesting fun facts that you might not have known about the university. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, a couple weeks back, I went to Oxford and it was kind of cute. I'm not gonna lie. It really immersed me in the history and the age of the town because the architecture, you can tell that has been there for quite some time. And I took some nice cute pics, which you guys will see on the screen. And I just explored around and looked at different buildings on the campus. Now, my one regret, not regret, is that I didn't get to see the Bodleian Library. I had it on my list of things to do, but when I got there, I wasn't prepared. I found out that you actually have to sign up to do the tour, so I didn't get to do that. It's one of the oldest operating libraries in Europe. It was operating since the 14th century, so that was something that the inner history buff in me really wanted to do, but I didn't get to do it. So I will be going back at some point to do that tour. But regardless of missing out on that, I still got to explore the university grounds and just immerse myself in the feeling of history at the university. And as you know, I did some additional research into the university because my interest was piqued into just the general background of it based off of its architecture and me telling that it's been there for quite some time. So I started off by what everyone would do, doing their initial Googles, and I came across the University of Oxford's website. And it states that it's been teaching or having evidence of teaching at the university since 1096, but that the university started rapidly growing in the year of 1167, specifically because Henry II, the King of England at the time, placed a ban on students from going to the University of Paris, which consequently grew the University of Oxford. Now, I found this really interesting because I was like, why was that done? And how do the two things connect together with banning one person, one banning students from going to one university, actually increasing the population of the other? So I did a little bit of digging and found a really nice quote that explains all of this in a journal called Oxford Town Gown and Crown by S. Jordan Joseph. S. Jordan Joseph, not Joseph. But the quote reads, due to his political differences with France in the 1160s, the king placed a ban on travel to that country. At the time, the University of Paris was the major European center of scholarship. Because of Henry's travel ban, numerous English students would otherwise have gone to Paris, besides many already studying there. They looked to the homeland for an alternative, and Oxford was the place the majority of them chose. Though the town did not even begin to compare with Paris in those days, students were probably attracted there because of the town's centrality and easy accessibility from widely scattered parts of England. End quote. Now, I found that interesting, mainly because of the involvement of Henry II. I knew and I know that Oxford is the oldest university in the UK, so obviously it would have an involvement with the British Crown and just have a level of status that other universities wouldn't have. But the direct involvement of Henry II into the consequent growth of the university, even if it was inadvertently, was still interesting to me. And it got me thinking about the wider involvement of kings and queens across the history of the UK and how it affected and influenced Oxford University. And I found another quote about another king that was intimately involved with the University of Oxford, which was Henry I, the king before the first king that did the travel ban. And the quote comes from a journal called The Origin of the University of Oxford, written by T.E. Holland, and it reads: But the scholar king, Henry I, was fond of Oxfordshire, just inserting Oxfordshire, just the wider name of the town. And in 1114, he built himself a hunting box at Woodstock, where he also collected a menagerie of wild beasts. And in 1130, he completed what became his favorite palace of Beaumont, just outside the city walls. Whenever, whether we are told, whether by writers of much later date, the king came to Oxford to enjoy the society of scholars, or scholars came thither to enjoy the patronage of the king. It is certain that the first reliable traces of teaching there occur in the early years of Henry. End quote. So you can see how in that time there was a literal casual atmosphere of just the fraternizing of scholars and the king together on the ground, whether it was with his menagerie of beasts or with hunting or just exchanging discourse on scholarly thoughts and literature, because Henry I is known as the Scholar King. So he was deeply interested in the academic sphere. You can see how the university was always closely associated with the upper echelons of power, especially if you're having a king just casually peruse the grounds and talking with scholars and just immersing himself in the culture as if he was a scholar of the university. Also, and this is not the only time that the university benefited or just experienced the patronage of the crown. They actually experienced other instances where the crown was directly involved in the university, but in a place of privilege and in the place of setting the university apart from the townsfolk, which is why you get the term town and gown, because it represents the rift between the townsfolk and the university. Because as I stated with Cambridge, the same thing is with Oxford. The university and the townsfolk were having beef. And the beef that they had in Cambridge is nothing compared to the beef that they had in Oxford. It's actually the reason why the townsfolk went from Oxford to Cambridge in the first place, because of the intense beef. Now, one article that I read, which is the first one, also had a quote as to how the university actually experienced privileges set and apart from the townsfolk, which would give you some insight into why there was beef in the first place. So the quote reads: Henry II granted Oxford the charter, so important to medieval cities, which gave townspeople privileges in running their own government and trade, and confirming their freedom from any irksome duties to feudal lords. End quote. So Henry II actually conferred special powers onto the university that was similar to those of townfolk, that actually gave the university the power to be a city set and apart within and of itself, apart from the town of Oxford. It actually had the privileges of running itself as its own type of school government, and just being able to be active in trade, or just things that you would associate not with the university but with a town as a town. So the university had towns privileges, and this created a rift between the university and the townsfolk, because you have a university in the town not only acting as university but acting as a town in and of itself with these special privileges. So they were kind of just a closed society within the town, and being able to associate yourself with the king and kings, not only just Henry the First, but Henry the Second as well, and other kings henceforth, kind of put them in a status that was above and apart from the townsfolk. Now, one other instance that was very notable in reaffirming and just placing extra importance on the university, and which is still seen today, is the powers that were granted to them after a scandalous time in the university. So, in the year 1209, the university had a scandal where two of its scholars were involved in, or not involved, were assumed to be involved in the murder of a woman in the town. And because of this, the townsfolk went on a witch hunt and ended up hanging the two scholars that were supposedly involved in this murder. And this whole hanging of the scholars is the reason why the scholars actually left the University of Oxford in the first place, because this period of time actually fueled riots in the towns, just going on a witch hunt for these two scholars. And the hanging of these two scholars actually spooked a lot of the scholars at the university and forced them to leave Oxford and start the University of Cambridge. Now, the leaving of a lot of the population of the University of Oxford to Cambridge kind of put the university in a little bit of a stupor. And in order to reaffirm its position and kind of reinvigorate the university, there were other more, I would say, not important, but other powers placed on the university that reaffirmed their position to try and reinvigorate its place and put a second spur of growth on the university. And there's a quote that comes from a book that is widely accessible, it's open access, you can access it yourself on the University of Stanford website, and it is written by John Walensky and called The Intellectual Properties of Learning. And this quote kind of, not kind of, but actually shows the powers that were put on place on the university after the scandal that kind of reaffirmed their position. The quote reads: officials approached the papal legate in England, Nicholas D. Romanus, for a settlement that might bring the university back to life in Oxford. Nicholas complied with a bull on June 20th, 1214, that firmly established the scholars' legal rights and town's obligations with an attractive package that protected them from civil law and provided discounted rents. End quote. Now, just in case you're wondering, a bull, which is a papal bull, is just an official document that carries the seal of the Pope and is legally binding. So, this papal bull, as I said, actually gave the university greater status over the townsfolk and actually allowed them to evade civil law so that scholars felt more comfortable and protected with being at the university, and it reaffirmed the university's status and helped the University of Oxford to reaffirm its place and expand in henceforth years. And another fun fact about that, this papal bull also established the office of the chancellor at the university, and the office of the chancellor is still in place today, which is a fun fact. So it's just interesting how these royal and papal decrees that conferred powers on the university are still in place today, as can be seen through the chancellor's office. And it just speaks to the position and the status of the university. Because when you hear Oxford and Cambridge, it doesn't just hold their academic status and their academic position, but holds their position in relation to other offices of power and just spaces of power, such as the British Crown. So, yeah, that really says it all in relation to the University of Oxford's position as a university of power, not just academically, but privilege wise. So, yeah, that is honestly all I have to say, because that is all I have done some digging on and what interests me about the university. There is honestly so much other stuff to say, but these are the points that really stood out to me when I was reading about the university, and I just wanted to share them with you guys. And that's it. So, if you want to hear more about different universities across the UK, as I said, drop it in the comments and let me know if you want me to do more universities and look into their history. If not, Oxford will be the last, but don't fear, I still have some other episodes that you'll be interested in, some that I have done in the past, or another episode that will be dropping in 2 weeks on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts about a book, movie, TV show, place, or thing. I don't know yet, and you don't know yet, but you have to tune in 2 weeks on Z Talks to see. So until then, see you in 2 weeks.